Last week, I reviewed a 2022 game called Chop Goblins that allowed me to take out my aggression on a weird cameo by Dracula. That turned out to be so much fun that I've decided to look at another game with a slightly out-of-place celebrity boss. The game in question is Super DynoStory, a weird side-scrolling adventure game in the spirit of Super Metroid that has you going head-to-head with a surprisingly hostile Santa Claus. It's just one of the many fun little quirks that helps to make this throwback game stand out in an extremely crowded genre. But is knocking out Santa enough of a reason to recommend this debut release from Studio DynoStorm? Find out now as I review Super DynoStory. The first thing that you need to know about this game is that it has absolutely nothing to do with dinosaurs. No, this is not the over-the-top adventures of a super smart T-Rex, but rather the irreverent story of Dyno, a young astronaut who is hauling gold across the galaxy for a mysterious client. Of course, his job isn't going to be that easy, as he quickly learns when his ship crash lands on a snowy planet controlled by a gold-stealing leader named Pallid. It's now up to Dyno to thoroughly explore this strange new world, collect power-ups, and defeat this Pallid guy once and for all. As a side-scrolling action game, Super DynoStory checks off most of the MetroidVania cliches. It's the kind of adventure where Dyno must find a useful item that will open up a new part of the planet, where he'll find yet another new item that will, you guessed it, open up even more new areas to explore. It's the formula that has kept indie developers in business for at least 20 years, and Studio DynoStorm plays it pretty safe with the tropes. In fact, the game plays it so safe that we start out not even being able to jump. We have to stomp on a mega slug just to get the ability to leap off the ground. We'll eventually find power-ups that'll make it easier to see in dark places, a gun that'll help you survive the brutal wildlife, and even the ability to run straight through rocks and other obstacles. Although it goes in some interesting directions, Super DynoStory plays it straight when it comes to most of the power-ups that you're searching for. I kept waiting for something new and inventive, but that's just not what this game is going for. In a lot of ways, Super DynoStory really does look and feel a lot like the other games in the genre. Earning the ability to jump and shoot a gun is hardly earth-shaking stuff, and the level designs and backgrounds feel like they could have been pulled out of at least a dozen other throwback games. This is just not a game that tries to shake up the formula or tries to innovate the genre. That's perfectly happy painting inside the lines and following the leader, which can be both a good and, unfortunately, a bad thing. Now, what Super DynoStory has going for it is a sense of humor. I already mentioned that you fight a hostile Santa Claus, but very little of this game takes itself seriously. To show you what I mean, one of the very first characters that you end up running into on the road to get your gold back is a guy who is desperate to turn you into a furry. There are just so many characters inhabiting this world that are not only self-aware that they're inside of a video game, but are quick to poke fun at the many cliches and tropes that are specifically found in this type of adventure. This is a game that is so persistent that it eventually beats you down until you can't help but laugh at its absurdity. Plus, it makes some fun observations about the Metroidvania games and throwback titles in general. If you stick with the adventure and see it through to the end, a big reason for that is likely the non-stop jokes and humor. That said, I'm not a big fan of the voice acting. In fact, I'll go one step further and say that most of it is kinda bad. That again, much like everything else, you end up getting used to it after a while. In that sense, it's actually a bit endearing, but there's never a point where it becomes so bad that it's good. For me, I found the writing to be way better than the line delivery, which made me wish that the game had just skipped the voice acting altogether. Speaking of things that I don't like so many other titles inspired by Super Metroid, a lot of your job is just to remember how different parts of the planet are connected together. The problem is that you can't look at the full map, so it's extremely easy to get mixed up and turned around while trying to figure out where to go next. Super DynoStory is not always great about subtly pointing you in the right direction. Now let me tell you, there were plenty of times where I was lost and had no idea how to make headway. Being able to see the full map, or even flip between the different sections, would have at least eased some of that frustration and made the mysterious planet a lot easier to navigate. And for as funny as a lot of the boss dialogue is, the actual one-on-one fights are a real letdown. There are a couple of really good ones early on, but once you've earned some of the key abilities, most of them will go down without much of a fight. There were a few fights that were so short that it actually felt like I was cheating the game. And even when you're forced to fight all the bosses at once, which is one of the many inspired gags in the game, I was legitimately shocked at how easy it was. What should have been an epic battle was over just as quickly as it began. That's disappointing. And yet, despite these problems, I couldn't help but have a good time playing Super DynoStory. I mean, the graphics are nothing to write home about, but exploring the strange planet and solving the many puzzles is still a lot of fun. This is a formula that has worked for countless other games, so you shouldn't be surprised that it works here. Toss in some clever writing and a few really funny characters, and you have yourself an aggressively vanilla adventure that is improved by a snarky sense of humor. Super DynoStory is not an essential Metroidvania adventure, but it certainly has its moments. It's funny, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, which are two things that should keep you invested for the few hours that it'll take to beat. Unfortunately, the voice acting isn't always great, and it's sometimes challenging to get around, but this is a solid debut from Studio DynoStorm. If you're looking for a side-scrolling action game with some funny gags and an irreverent story, then you could do a whole lot worse than Super DynoStory. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What game are you looking forward to in 2023? Yeah, it has nothing to do with DynoStory, but I'm curious what you're excited to see this year. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back tomorrow with a countdown nobody asked for and certainly nobody wants. That's right, it's Electronic Gaming Monthly's top 4 new-on games. Oh boy, you've been warned. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,